So, welcome to week 8. Can you believe it? So next week, getting all confused there, is our last class this series. So I will be inviting you to join me next time round. And those of you who are on my Facebook group, you have been making various suggestions about what you'd like to cover next time round. So over the weekend, I will be having a look at those and look at the dates in my diary and getting a new start date for you. So I will let you know as soon as I can when the new course will start and how much it will be. So watch this space, as they say. So for those of you who weren't able to join me live last week, this is what we made, a very modern, I haven't got any flowers in this, by the way, a very modern wirework structure with test tubes in it to hold the flowers. So I think it probably put you under a little bit of pressure when you were making this in class, because you weren't quite sure what to expect. And I think you all did a really good job, as I've seen in the Facebook page. So some of you use the green wire. I use the annealed wire, and I left mine outside purposefully so it would go rusty. And those of you who used your normal floristry wires, the green wires, I was rather impressed with how well they turned out, because it looks like you had lovely sort of bits of new growth, as if it was for spring, bits of grass, or bits of new growth from your spring bulbs and things like that. So I thought it worked out really well. Last week, how many wires did I like? I didn't count them. I'm sorry about that, Joan. I didn't count them. But of course, every wire I used was one wire made 2 spikes. And my long wire was about 40 centimetres long. And I'm just looking down there. I squeezed them up because I was wrapping around and then squeezed them up. So I reckon each of my 2 wires, so each of my single wire, which made 2 spikes, occupied just less than half a centimetre. So if we work that out, if I've got 1 wire every half a centimetre and my overall wire was 40 centimetres long, that means I used 80 wires, if my maths is correct. I'm quite surprised that I used that many, but as a ballpark figure, it's always, you can never say precisely how many wires you are going to need or use unless you're going to physically count them, and I didn't. But yes, using that simple maths about how long my wire was and roughly how many wires I was getting every half centimetre or so, I think I probably must have used about 80. And then it probably took, from beginning to end, I would say a good 20 minutes, if not half an hour, to make them. And once you got in the swing of it, I think it did become easier. It's like everything we do in flowers. You have to, especially when it's a new technique, just work through the pain, and then you'll find once you've done a little bit of what you're doing, you get used to the technique, you learn how to adapt it to suit your style, and then you can continue on. So hopefully that's helped you out there. So before we get on with this week, just to remind you about next week. So next week is our last class. You will need to order yourself some bear grass. So I am suggesting that you use 2 bunches of bear grass. So when you go and order, and you will need to order your bear grass ahead of time from your florist, make sure, I know I've said this before when we've used bear grass before, that you want to order a whole bunch of bear grass. Don't be fobbed off with 2 little strands, because you need to be sure that the florist understands you don't want a few little fluffy bits to put into a bouquet. You want the whole bunch, and I'm holding my hand up to show you how big a bunch is of the bear grass, because we're going to make a construction, a very modern looking, eggy, organic looking shape. You could probably get away with 1 bunch of bear grass. You might find that you haven't quite got enough to play with, so I'm definitely going to go for 2 bunches of bear grass. I'm also going to be doing some wrapping, and I have got one of these wraps of real wire. I don't know why everything comes wrapped up in a silver package. It's the wire that's on a cotton reel, hence it's called real wire with 2 E's. And I've chosen the silver, and then I'm going to put my construction into something, and this is what I'm putting it in. I've managed to find from the charity shop this goldfish bowl style vase. So the bear grass is going to go in there, it's going to be bound over with the silver wire, and if you add any flowers, that's going to be an absolute minimum. And perhaps if you've got your test tubes from last week, you could put some little flowers in, but it's about the construction really, rather than having something that is traditionally got lots, it's not going to look traditional, it's going to look very modern and very contemporary. So I will send you out the buying list next week when you get the recorded class through. There is a picture in there, you can have a look and just to get more of an idea of what it is I'm talking about. And if you have got any questions or queries, let me know in the Facebook group or reply to the email when I send it out to you, and I can set you on the right path. So I'm going to put those bits away. And let's talk about this week's class. So Mother's Day is coming up. I'm hoping I'm going to get treated, and I hope you get treated too by your nearest and dearest. So I'm going to make an arrangement, a traditional basket of flowers, although I'm using a trug. It doesn't matter what kind of container you use. But I picked this trug up from a garage sale last summer. It's just, a standard size. You could make your arrangement in a basket, or you could use any other container you like. It doesn't have to be in a basket. You'll then need some flower foam and something to put your flower foam in. Now at this point, do not tell my husband I'm still using our breakfast bowls for flower arranging. I found they're quite a handy size. And what I have made sure was just that when I put my container inside, my flower foam inside, that I want to make sure that my it's not going to rock around at all. So it depends how wide your basket is as to whether you've got a sufficiently flat area to put your flower foam inside. So you may have to do a little bit of measuring up before you start, just to make sure that everything's going to fit nice and securely. What you might want to do is, if your surface isn't flat, or you feel you want a bit of extra padding, I've got my flower arranging towel here that I could put that in the bottom to just try and give myself a really good secure base. Obviously, if you're gifting this to somebody, perhaps your old hand towel isn't going to be the best thing, but it could be scrunched up newspaper or something like that if you felt that you wanted to get a more secure base. So as I said, I'm going to be using flower foam for my arrangement today, but you may well have spotted, if you were eagle-eyed, that of course you can do this arrangement if you want to go foam free, if you don't want to use any of the flower foam. So what I've done ahead of time is I have taken my pot tape, my waterproof tape, and I have made grid lines across the top of my bowl and set them down on the edge. And that's another reason why you could have your towel, because imagine if you've got your water slopping around inside, you really do need to make sure that it is steady. And that is where you might want to really fit in your towel around the edge to hold everything rock steady. Another option you've got is, of course, if you actually had some potted foliage, some, not necessarily house plants, but imagine you were growing some rosemary out in the garden and you still had it in pots. You could even potentially put those pots inside to wedge your water, your container of water in one place, and that would sort of become your underlayer of greenery in your vase area. So it's entirely up to you. I'm going to be using foam today, number one, because I've got it already. We know we're all trying to work towards more foam-free flower arrangements because the foam isn't good for the environment. So I will be doing that, and it's also got the advantage that I can lift up my container and show you what I'm doing without water spilling out everywhere. So probably today I'm going to do everything forward facing today. You're not going to get that look over my shoulder. So I'm going to take that out and then bring on my turntable just so I can have things moving all the way around. And I have pre-soaked my flower foam today. You have seen me many, many times soaking flower foam. And if you're watching this on record and you're unsure, do either comment underneath the video or reply to the email and let me know that if you're not quite sure what to do. The best thing to do is to take your container and put it inside your basket and then decide how much foam you need. So you know that the foam comes in a brick it's got little score lines so you can divide it into 3. Do not cut a third of your foam off until you're sure that you actually need a third of a piece of foam, because it's possible that you might need a little bit more. And the reason I say that is because we want the foam to stick up a little bit above the height of the container, the receptacle for it. And I want to be able to make a very traditional flower arrangement where everything is radiating out from the centre. So what I want to do, I've got a table knife here that I cut my foam with originally. If I lay my knife across the basket, the ridge of the basket and my container are about the same height. So I know that I want my flower foam to stick up just a little bit. So ahead of time, I've cut myself a piece of flower foam. So can you see that it's sticking up a little way above my bowl? And for me, that's probably a good 3 centimetres above. You will need to just go through that slow process of deciding how much foam you need before you cut it off the block and soak it. So ideally you want to soak what you need and leave the other half or other part of the block dry in order that you can use that another time. So I'm quite happy with that, and if you can see that, if I hold it up straight, you can just see it's protruding above the height of the rim of my container. So I'm going to be able to get my flowers in horizontally and going up a little bit more, so get a nice bit of drapage. If everything is sunk down, imagine that piece of foam wasn't in there, and I only had a tiny bit of foam in there, I could only put my greenery and my flowers in from an overhead position. I wouldn't be able to be quite so successful about getting those sort of horizontal placements over the edge. So the flower foam goes in like that. I then, I'm just going to move that temporarily, I then like to chamfer the edge of my foam. So this is what I mean. I just take off the square edges. And again, if you forget to do this or you don't do it, it doesn't really matter. So that's what I'm doing, is taking off that little triangle corner. And it just means that when I come to put flowers and greenery into that bit of the foam, I've got a surface to do it on. I'm not trying to get my flowers into the square edge of the foam. So you can see at that angle that it's just shaped a little bit. And then I need to anchor my foam in place so it doesn't fall over. And what I like to do is to make 2 lines across my foam. I don't go one way and then the other as if you were wrapping a parcel, because you'll get the double piece of tape right in the middle of the flower foam. That may well be where you want to put one of your special flowers, and one of the more eye-catching flowers. So that's why I do 2 lines running parallel. So taking a piece of tape over the top of the container, and I'm going down probably about a couple of centimetres, and I'm pulling the tape quite tightly, so it's just nicking into the flower foam, and that way I know it's going to hold. So it's not just resting on the top. I've just tried to pinch it down, and you probably can't pick it up on the camera, but it's just sort of created a bit of an indentation into the flower foam, so I know that's going to hold really steady. I've got quite narrow tape here. This tape also comes in a slightly wider size as well. It may be that you want to fold your tape in half, have the full width on the container, and then pinch it together if you want narrow tram lines going over your foam, particularly if you feel that it's not leaving you enough space to arrange your flowers. So that is the mechanics done. So advantage as well, I've got in a round bowl and a rectangular piece of foam, so I can pour water into the gaps over the course of the next few days to keep my flowers alive. And then before I put it into my basket, just haphazardly, I'm actually going to think about it first. Can you see that my block, a little bit of water splitter, is rectangular? I've got the long side running long in front of me. I'm going to put the long side to run long with the basket, so it gives me more foam to put my flowers in that will extend sideways. If you turn it around 90 degrees and you've got the long bit between your handles, you're just sort of cutting yourself short a little bit, and you're going to have longer stems to reach out to the edge of your basket. So it's just, and again, if you forget to do this, it doesn't really matter. But at some point in the future, you'll probably think, why didn't I twist my foam round? Because it sort of gives you, enables your flowers to come out a little bit longer. So that's what I've got there, the length of my foam running with the length of the basket. So the next thing we need to think about is whether the flower foam is, we know it's secure in the container, the water, where I'm going to put the water in afterwards to top it up, but it's not actually yet secure in the basket. So that's why I've got some string to hand, and I am going to take my string and tie a piece onto the handle of my basket. I'm trying to do this really neatly because I don't want the string to be noticeable. Like that. And then taking my string, I'm going to do a sort of figure of 8 over my basket, and I'll lift this up in the middle. Can you see them? Because I've got my flower foam then anchored under the string, it's not going to move around quite so much. And go back to the beginning and tie it off in the same place. So I will lift this up and you'll be able to see more clearly what I have done. Like that, just cutting off my ties. I don't want to have loads of string that I need to hide. So I will just hold on to it. That is what I've done. And because my foam is slightly raised above the rim of my container, that's what enables the string to hold it in place. So if your foam is below the height of the container and you think, oh, I've got to add string because that's what Julie told me to do, the string's not going to do anything. It's just going to be a line between the handles. It's not actually going to grip your flower foam in place. So obviously you're not actually going to be turning your flower arrangement upside down. But there is, if you have a little bit of a stumble between your kitchen tap and you're topping up with water and the coffee table where you're going to put your flowers, you don't want it all moving around a little bit. Let's just see how far I can hold it, what angle I can put it at before it starts to fall. So that's not bad, and that's all we're doing with that piece of string. So the mechanics is, we've wet the foam, we've put it into the container, we've fastened it into that container, and then we've fastened the container into the basket, and I've used the handles to do that. If you are actually using a woven basket, it may be that you might want to thread your string through the weave of the basket, just whatever suits you. So mechanics done, and now we get started. So I like to use greenery first to, a bit like sketching. Imagine I'm an artist, how long, how far out do I want my greenery to come? How far up do I want it to come up the handle? And I just find it quite, it's just a useful and again a sort of method, quite mindful way of doing it. I'm not just going to go hodgepodge with my flowers. We're going to layer up what we're going to do in a measured and thoughtful kind of way. So let's have a look at my greenery. I've got some artificial greenery because I'm a little bit low on greenery in my garden, and I've got some eucalyptus. So eucalyptus, it's not a Florist eucalyptus, this is storm damaged eucalyptus. So a friend of mine said, trees come down my garden, would you like some eucalyptus? So of course I said yes please. So I'm going to work with the natural eucalyptus first and then fill in with my artificial afterwards. So if you are using all natural greenery for your arrangement, I would normally advise that you look at 3 different kinds of greenery, just to think about your colour of the greenery. So not all greenery, not all foliage is actually green. You might want to look at the texture of it and whether it's got a shiny leaf, or like my Snecchio here, it's got quite a velvety touch to it, and the shape of the leaves as well. So you don't want the greenery to all look the same. That can sometimes be a lesson to be learned, really. You don't want everything to look sort of spotty and dotty by using everything that looks very similar. So my leaves here look quite rough and leathery on my eucalyptus. They are a long elliptical shape, and then I've got the velvet and the sort of cut out shape on the edge of that. Ideally I'd like a third, but sometimes it doesn't just work like that. So I'm going to use my scissors, and it's on a bunch here. I'm just going to cut myself a stem to start working with it. And it's quite nice, this greenery, because it's got a natural arch. So it's going to naturally hang over the edge of my basket, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to come a little way over the edge of my basket, but not, you know, not a long way over the edge of it. So you'll need to think as well, you know, if you know you're putting this arrangement, actually it's going to sit on your dining room table, you could go a little bit longer. But if you know it's going on your coffee table, you might want to keep it a little bit shorter. So I cut it off the stem because I just needed something more manageable, and then I measure up. So what I'm doing here, I'm deciding how much of an overlap, a flow over from my rim I want. And then I'm looking at the stem, and that's the start of my flower foam here. And then I'm thinking, well, how much stem do I want to put into my flower foam? So in theory, I could keep this stem this length, but what I'd end up doing would be pushing it through the flower foam. And I run the risk that the stem's actually going to pop out the other side, and then it's not actually going to be in water and it's going to die. And you don't want your stems to be overly long inside the flower foam, because you're going to end up with a whole intermeshed a lot of stems in your foam, and then when you come to add your beautiful flowers in, you're not going to have any room in the foam to put them in. So what I'm going to do is going to come along, look to the edge of my flower foam, and probably just go another 2 centimetres in, recut the stems at an angle, and that helps take up water because there's more surface area, but also it's like a little dart, and you'll find it easier to hold your stem like a pencil and slide it in. So first stem in, just resting in like that. So the next piece of greenery I want a matched piece to come out the other side. So you could do that whole business about measuring it up this side and putting it in. But if you're happy with this length here, I might just move that greenery out of the way there so you can see more clearly. Measure it up against your first piece. So I can see that that looks about right. I went in about that far. I need to cut there. And then I'm aiming for the middle of my flower foam. So I've gone quite near the top, and it's sort of dead centre in the middle. And that gives me 2 pieces coming sideways. I then need to fill out the sides. So I always go north, south, west, east. So I've done north and south. I then want to get some smaller pieces. And again, I hold them up to the side of the container. I want them to go a little bit over the edge. And actually this piece is forked, it's a bit too long. What I'm going to do is pinch the fork together and cut it there. And that gives me 2 pieces for the price of 1. And that can go in there. And it goes one side of my handle. And then the same, the other side. So I measure up and then put that in there. So I've got 4 pieces of greenery in there. North, south, west, east. And then you can see all these other gaps. So you need to think about it, but sort of almost like the flag, the Union flag. And you're going to then come in and fill in the diagonals. So I've got my greenery here, and once you've got the eye for this, you can then sort of start cutting more spontaneously. But I'm going to fill in this bit here. I'm probably at the moment go for 2 pieces there. So I've got 1 coming out the edge, 1 coming out there. And then I will spin it round, and then I'm going to do the same on the opposite side as well. So I can eye these up now. These pieces here for my basket are probably about 10 or 12 centimetres long. So I'm starting to get my eye in, a bit more confident. I don't feel I need to measure absolutely everything. But if you're not quite so confident, just take the extra step and just every piece, you know, cut it long off the branch first and then cut it. Well, then eye it up and then cut it when you're ready. And then that way you won't be wasting anything. So I'm cutting these on my lap here. 1 piece there and another piece there. So I've just gone all the way around the edge. And of course you could start and, you know, start at the handle and work your way around. But I just find it easier to go side to side, handle to handle, and then fill in the sort of diagonal pieces that way and the diagonal pieces that way. So that is what I have got. It doesn't look like much at the moment. The next thing I'm going to do is to put that same piece of greenery in centrally. This is why I didn't put my tape in that crosswork. But I'm going to come quite short. I don't want to go above the height of the handle. And the idea is that you imagine that you've just picked these flowers from your garden and you're going to pick the basket up. Now, in all probability, it may well be that the trug or the basket you're using, the handle may not be particularly strong. So although you want to give the illusion that you could pick your basket up, I would always recommend that you would move your arrangements around your house by picking them up from the bottom and moving them, just in case that handle isn't quite as secure as you might have thought it is. So let's measure up. So I would say this is too high. If you go above the handle, it's got kind of no point in having a handle on the basket. And you might as well choose any other container that doesn't have this sort of attractive detail on it. So that's why I always come a little bit lower in like that. So what we've got the sort of bedding down in a flat horizontal layer. We've got this piece upright, and then I've got a whole surface of my foam that doesn't have any greenery in it, and nothing coming out at that angle. So that's what I'm going to do next. If I move slightly across here, can you see there's obviously this big gap here. So I need to start putting in some greenery that is about a 45-degree angle that comes out and then starts to fill out. So not only have I got the overall shape and length and width of my arrangement, but it starts to give me that profile to it as well. So I will go through some more greenery and do the same thing. So for me, I'm using the same greenery, and you'll notice as I put it in, I'm not packing it in, I'm being quite sparse with how I put it in. So let's go through and do that. So I want I'm just going to cut myself some longer pieces. So let's do it the same way. So I don't want this piece to be, let's see how I can move that there. This piece was long to the end. I'm not coming out as long. I'm probably coming out 2/3 of the way down. Can you line? I've still got this angle coming through like that. And that's what I'm trying to create. And once I'm happy with that, I measure up with this one, with trim, and I'm putting this piece of greenery on the top surface of the foam. So all the base pieces went into the side of the foam, the bit of the foam that was sticking above the height of the container. This one I have put in on the top surface of the foam. So I've got one at either end, and I'm going to come in with my 2 short pieces near the handle. I've taken them long off the twig, but I will measure up, I think actually, by luck rather than design. That one was about right. This one used to be a little bit smaller. So I've gone and created a cross. If I wanted to, I could then fill in the diagonals. You get the idea. You can do that in your own time. So that is the very sparse beginning of the arrangement. And this then, if you had your second lot of flowers, second lot of greenery, sorry. So let me think, what sort of greenery might you have? Let's say you've got some lovely bay from the garden. So that's aromatic, a much deeper green. You would basically go through and make the same pattern again. But instead of putting everything in exactly the same place, you just offset it slightly. So whereas I got my first bit of eucalyptus in there, the pointy bit at the end, I would come in with my next bit of greenery just off to the side a little bit. Or it may be that you've got some lovely leatherleaf fern that you might have bought from your florist, and that will do that whole end of your basket pretty much all in one go because it's triangular shaped. So I'm now going to come in and do that with my second bit of greenery, and then if I had a third bit, I would then do that with my third bit of greenery, just so you've got this lovely base for your flowers. It makes your flowers go further because it's starting to cover up your oasis. You don't want to see that, but it also gives a great foil or a background for your flowers. And if you're able to pick greenery from your garden, it means you need to spend, it's a sort of cost saving, so you don't need so many flowers. If you had no greenery at all, you could follow the same principles, but you're going to have an awful lot of flowers to complete the arrangement. So here, taking my artificials, again, I could either bend these or take them off, cut them off. I'm going to cut them off using my wire cutters. The beauty of this is I can bend them because these are all on wires. So I'm going in long bit first, and I've just taken that off to the outside edge. I'm happy with how that's draping down. So I'll take my next bit, just measure that up to go in the other end. And because this one is quite bushy, so you want to make sure you've got some greenery, it's got a bushy element to it. You don't want to use things that are really, really skinny. Perhaps, I don't know, you had bamboo in your garden and it might have a few green tufts at the end. You do need an awful lot of those to get your coverage. So not only is it looking at the colour of your greenery and the texture of it and the shape, you do also need to have some bushy bits as well so they fill out. Otherwise, you will be there for ages putting in 20, 30 stems of greenery. That then starts to block up your flower foam, and it also means that it's going to take you ages to cover up the flower foam as well. So the object of the game is to make a lovely looking flower arrangement, but you don't want to see your flower foam if that's what you're using at the end of it. So I've managed to get that there. I might just have a few more pieces to go through. So again, I'm using this greenery as if it is natural greenery. And if you're able to I don't know whether you've got a turntable you work on at home, but you will need to make sure your arrangement looks good all the way around. So even if you're not able to spin it on a turntable, it is handy if you can look at it from different sizes. So you will need to keep lifting yours up and then placing it down. So with these little small bits, it's pretty much like it is if this was natural greenery. Can you see where I've cut it? I've ended up with this tufted edge, this sort of truncated piece here. If I cut that away to the top of the leaf, it just looks more natural. If a piece of artificial greenery can look more natural, and then I can use that in the same way again. And you do the same thing with your greenery. So all the ends of the greenery always look really beautiful and they always taper off. But once you need the short bits, you're going to have to sort of work your way down the natural greenery and try and make the best use of what you've got, especially if you've bought that greenery from a florist. It would get pretty expensive if you were only taking off the top bits that looked really pretty. So I think probably for me and for you watching, I've probably got enough greenery in. In my heart of hearts, I'm thinking, yes, I would like a bit more green, something to give me a little bit more of a contrast. But you get the idea. And can you see quite clearly, I don't know if this camera's picking it up, but the green, I can see the green of my flower foam. So by no means is this ready and complete. But I don't want to over green it at this stage because I want to have space for my flowers. Otherwise, again, I'm going to have a very green flower arrangement and no flowers in it. So let me clear the decks a little bit and bring on the flowers that I am going to be using. Okay. So I've gone with a lovely, well, I was going to say summery, it's springtime, isn't it? A springtime combination of mainly yellows and purples. And what you need to do is you need to get to know your flowers and you need to decide what job each flower is going to have, rather than just randomly putting them in your arrangement. Again, being quite methodical about it. I feel like I'm killing the joy of flower arrangement at this stage, but if you're methodical about it, you won't get lost. And then once you get more confident in doing these kinds of arrangements, you can, take shortcuts and do it in a much more speedy way. But I quite like doing it methodically because it means I'm not stressing myself out. So what I'm going to be doing here is I think I'm going to start with my roses. I'm going to take those out. So these are supermarket flowers, looking lovely and lush. Off to one side there. So I've got my scissors at the ready. And when I bought my flowers this morning, I recut the stems and put them in water, but I didn't really take much of the leaves off. I just made sure there was no leafage sitting in my bucket of water. So you've got the choice here whether you take the natural greenery off your plant material or not. And because I haven't got much greenery in my basket, I'm going to leave on all of this. If it looks a bit too bedraggled at the end, I will take off a little bit of it, but I wouldn't strip all the leaves off. If I was going to strip some off, I would probably still leave it with the top few. Otherwise, I think it just looks a bit naked. So what I'm going to do with these first flowers is I'm going to track a line of flowers from this tip here through the middle of my basket out to the other side. And now if we were really planning this this is when our odd numbers come into play, because florists like arranging in odd numbers. I would either be getting, I don't know, 5 flowers through the middle, or I've got quite a lot of flowers, I could go 7 flowers through the middle. But what I would say is, don't fret about the numbers, because when it comes to when you finish your arrangement, you want to look as if it was all naturally created and wasn't following a strict formula. So if you see something in an arrangement and you think that just looks wrong, trust your natural instinct and work with what you've got. So I'm going to start here with my flower. I'm not cutting it yet. I'm sort of doing a dummy run, and what I want to make sure it does, that little bit of greenery stubbornly pointing up instead of pointing down, that I don't want it to come out as far as the end piece of greenery. If this flower arrangement is going to get knocked, so I'm taking it from the kitchen sink where I've topped up the water to put it in on my coffee table, I've got a couple of doorways to walk through. If I'm going to misjudge myself on those doorways, I want it to be the tips of the greenery that get damaged and not my comparatively more expensive flowers. So I could measure up to the end of the tip, but I'm going to slide it back in a bit so I've got the greenery at the edge protecting my flowers. So my flower stem is ending here. My flower foam that I can see is about here, and I know that I only need a couple of centimetres in there for it to lock into the flower foam, so I can cut it with confidence once. If you're feeling a bit nervous about this, cut it long to start with and put it in, and if you feel it's too long, take your stem out, cut a little bit more off it, but don't put it back in the same hole. Make another hole, because what you would have done with the first hole is created quite a deep hole, and then if you slide your shorter flower into that, it's not going to be in contact with the wet foam at the edge. You're going to have this little air pocket. So wanting to get this straight rose in, but wanting it to glide down to my tabletop, I need to sort of exaggeratedly push it into my flower foam uphill. I'm not going to go horizontally, I'm going to go for an upward angle without making sure it doesn't actually hit through the top of the flower foam. So I'll probably come a centimetre above the top of my dish, wiggling my way down and putting it in like that until it locks. So I'm quite happy with that there. And once I'm happy with that, I pick up my next rose and I measure it, and that looked great, that length. So I know that it needs to be cut about here. And I'm pushing this into this side of the foam, like that. And then I want to come in a little bit. So next the flower, I said I wanted it to be a line. Now, when we talk about lines in flower arranging, we don't want a straight line going all the way through, like dots on a page or something like that. Our straight line is actually going to be a very lazy S. It's going to wiggle slightly. So that when I come to put the next flower in, I want a little bit of distance between the flowers, because I have got loads of flowers, but imagine if you put them really close together, you pretty soon run out of them. So I'm going to leave, for me, what's that, 5-6 centimetres between them. And I'm going to hold it just off, for me, again here, I'm doing that to the left-hand side of my first flower, and it's going to go into the top surface of my foam. And I reckon if I cut it just above that leaf, that will be the right height, like that. And then I'm going to twist that round. So what I do on one side, I do on the other side. So I measure up and cut. So that one went in on that side. I'm going to go diagonally opposite the other side. So let me see if I can roll that forward so you can see it. I'm not quite sure. So this one went that side and that one went the other side. So what I'm doing is I'm working from the edge into the middle. So when I come on to the next one, again holding it up, I'm going to come the other side of that line that's been created by that first rose, getting my gap of a few centimetres down. See, look how short this rose is now compared to the first ones that we put in that were quite long. So that comes, and I'm going on the top surface, and as my flowers go in, they lay flat, and as they get to the middle, they can become higher and higher. It's a bit like if you were to have a book that you were reading, if you left it where the pages opened out. It's sort of that kind of look that we're trying to go for. So I was happy with that. Measure up here. That's about right. Coming in the other side. So I've got 3 on each side for me. And then I'm left with a middle. So why don't we put one that's really short, and that goes right under the handle like that. So I have completed a line going through the middle of my basket. And then I want to do the same thing, just take some flowers out to the side as well. So measuring it up, having a look. And if I put that one there, you can see it like that. And then I'll do the same for me at the back here. And so that means I've got 3 flowers going through the middle, 1, 2, and the third one at the back. Now I've got quite a lot of roses. So at this stage I'm thinking, I don't want it to look like I've got a massive flag through the front of my arrangement. So what I might do is to add in some more of my roses, but I might just wait until I've added in some of my other flowers. I don't want to sort of overkill it at the moment. So when I hold this up to you, imagine that's a straight line, and that's the coming to the front. I've got a triangular wedge here that hasn't got any flowers in it, and that's when I come in with my next flower. And I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice if, why don't I go in with my stalks? So I've chosen the stalks because they're a different shape. My roses are quite round. I've also got some Lizzie anthus, which was a sort of trumpet shaped. I've got spray carnations, which are quite round as well. So sometimes it's quite nice just to mix your shapes of your flowers up. And these are highly scented. I've got, rather annoyingly, I've got 2 pink ones and 2 purple ones. But if I keep pink and purple together, 1 of each, and then diagonally opposite do 1 of each, it kind of looks more planned and purposeful. So what I do here is I want my stock to come out about here, a nice little tip flowing over the edge, and looking at where my foam is. Again, I'm cutting these quite short, so practically in half, taking off bits of greenery because I want the clean stem to go into the flower foam. So that's coming over the edge. So I might take the other pink one now and measure that up against there so I know exactly where to go. And if you've got the measurement wrong to start with, that's, you know, don't cut all your flowers at the same time. Do it piece by piece, because you don't want to, you know, think you've got it right and then discover that you've got to recut everything again. Can you see now I'm slightly struggling to get that stem in because of my greenery? I didn't think I had much greenery, but it's gone in there. So I've gone on a diagonal. This piece here is meeting the piece at the back here. And then what I'm going to do is continue that line through. Again, I could put the other stalks in the other diagonal, but then I'm going to end up with 4 flowers, sort of pointing out and giving sort of a square grid in the middle. And I want to get this look where everything looks like it's flowing and natural and all very romantic. So I'm going to cut this stalk even shorter and just have it coming out at this level. So it's horizontal there and then about 45 degrees there. So I'm trying to measure up without breaking my stem. So I'm just going to eye that up, and really that is ultra short. I'm feeling quite nervous when I cut that, and slide that in there, and is that going in? Again, I'm feeling a tiny bit of resistance because I can feel that it's starting to fill out. You know, there's less and less room in that flower foam. So I twist it around that way, and pink, purple in the middle, like that. So that's given me a whole diagonal colour going one way, but imagine our flag again. I've got a diagonal here that hasn't got anything in it. So what are we going to do? Now, what I am going to add is my freesia. Now, these freesia will look lovely in a couple of days, but at the moment they haven't got much colour. Just get that out of the bucket. Out. So I've gone for purples again. Purples and yellow always look really great together, opposite sides of the colour wheel. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So measure it up and put it in that gap there. So these are quite fine stems, they'll fit in quite nicely, and there's just a little bit of drapage over the edge there, so I'm happy with that. And then I measure up against that first one and repeat. So I'm measuring first, I can see I cut it about there, recut the stem, and that goes in on the other side. So I'm balancing out my materials. Not only have I made sure that nothing's going to fall over, but I'm balancing everything out because I don't want to run out of materials part way round. And that's why I do one side first and then the other. And then these freesia, because they haven't opened out, they're really tiny at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I might actually get 3 freesia in each one of those little zones. So they have, when they start to open out, they start to have the same or an equivalent visual value as the very prominent stocks. So I start to put those in. So I will point you, I'm conscious you can't see them on the camera, but I will point them out to you when I've finished putting them in. So number 1 went in, draping over the edge. Number 2, slightly shorter, and that went into the top surface of the foam. And then number 3 is very short, practically upright, and is sort of giving a little visual support to that central rose there. And then I did exactly the same thing on the other side. So I've got, if you want to be technical, my roses are my focal flower. The stocks and the stripe of freesia are my transitional flower, struggling for words there. I can then use a filler flower. And what I'm going to do here is, I think I'm actually going to use my spray carnations. Is you want to make it look as if you're not painting by numbers. So I'm going to go through and I could work quadrant by quadrant and put in my filler flowers. So I will do this slightly faster because you've got the idea now. I'm trying to get the best use I can out of all of those flowers. So here I've got a nice bit at the top. I could come through and put that close to the top of my rose. I think I might just concentrate on the front part now and finish off later on. And then coming out, so I've got some long pieces as well, so I could cut them all off that main stem. It gives me a variety of length. So the long ones, let's just find the long ones, like that. They can go in and they will nod off towards the end of the basket, and then concentrating on that little triangular segment on that part of the basket, I can start to stagger them through. So whatever I put that sits at the outside edge of the basket comes through to the middle, and then I would repeat that in the stripe opposite, and then go back and do it in this section and repeat it back. And the other thing I'm going to add in, so imagine I put my carnations in everywhere, that I have got some gyp as well, and that's really great at blending. I thought, look, it's really light and delicate, perfect for Mother's Day, and it's got lots of branches to it. And again, before you start cutting all the little tips off, just think first of all where you want to actually put them. So it may be that I might want to cut off the bottom 2 sections, but if I cut all the others off as well, I'm going to end up with some very short pieces, and I might want a bit of length. So what I might do is cut those 2 pieces off there, and then leave myself with a longer piece that I can put out towards the outer edge. So I'm just going to spin this around here so I can concentrate on that little bit that I am filling in at the front, and start to put those pieces in. So it's about thinking about your, dividing your arrangement up, and instead of seeing it as this huge sort of blank canvas that you don't quite know where to start, break it down into these little segments and work with them. And I like to go long, short, diagonal, diagonal, and then concentrate on making those 4 little triangular shapes in each quadrant of the basket and work on them in turn. So opposites and opposite, opposite and opposite. So actually what I've done here is I've got 3/4 of this done, and only this segment here is actually finished at the moment. But I think you get the idea there. And then when we make and create afterwards class, I will repeat in the opposite corner and then do those finishing bits. And then if I've got any flowers left over, I've got 4 or 5 roses left over. If I see a gap, I could break the rule and just put the surplus flowers in where there's a gap. On the other hand, I might think, well, it's like when you're cooking, isn't it? A little cook's treat at the end of the day. I might, you know, gift this on to my favourite lady in my life, but I might think I might keep some of these flowers to myself and perhaps make another arrangement or just have them in a vase. So it's entirely up to you whether you stuff your arrangement full of flowers or whether you want to save them to make another arrangement. So I have got plenty of flowers here. Who knows whether I'll continue pushing them all in here or whether I will go off and make a second arrangement. So that brings us to the end of this section of the class. One thing I will say is before you sort of tidy away and finish your arrangement, do give your arrangement the once over. Make sure you can't see any flower foam, and if you can see flower foam and if you've got any bushy greenery left, tuck it down really low to cover the foam. So when I'm looking here, to me on the camera, I can sort of see a gap in there and I need to investigate that gap. And actually when I lift that leaf up, I can see the foam, so I know that when I come and look at my arrangement, that either needs a bit of greenery in there to hide the flower foam, or perhaps if I've got some more of my gyp left or my spray carnations, it just needs a little bit of something in there. So before you totally clear away, just take a moment perhaps to put your rubbish away, have a cup of tea, come back and look at your flowers and think, are there any gaps? Does it all look okay? And the only other thing I would say is, once you've got this far, I wouldn't then start taking your flowers in and out and think, oh, it's not quite in the right place. The more you fiddle, the more chance that you're not going to be able to get your flowers back in the right place. But you start to create these pock marks in your foam and the foam will start to disintegrate. So you have to approach your flowers with a degree of confidence, and by doing it in that sort of layered step-by-step approach, hopefully you won't be in too much of a tizzy and it'll all go to plan. So I'm going to leave the recording there. For those of you who are watching on the recorded video, I shall say goodbye. And for those of you here who are live with me, I shall stop the recording and take you off mute, and we'll move to our live Q&A, and then I will carry on making and creating alongside you for the rest of the session.